You are watching this from in the world. Welcome to Tales from the Longhouse. This is the very first collaboration between FEAST, which is an acronym for the Federation of Asian Storytellers, and WVSG, which is the Worldwide Virtual Storytelling Guild. My name is Roger Jenkins, and if you haven't seen from my name, I'm actually here in Singapore, where it's now 9 p.m. Cassandra is in Bristol in UK, which is somewhere there. And in New England, we've got Here's Crow and Jonathan Cummings and PapaJoe Gaudet, where I believe it's 9 a.m. in the morning. And in New Mexico, that's where we have Regina, who's been stranded in Santa Fe because of COVID. Wasn't her intention, but that's where she's ended up. Unfortunately, you could just see this little kind of red circle here on the edge. That is around what used to be called Borneo, the third largest island in the world. And we have three stories from this part of the world that we'll be sharing. The number in front of Cassandra's name means that she'll be second. She's telling a story from Sabah, which is a state of Malaysia, and Regina and I are both sharing stories from Sarawak. Okay. As you can see, the bulk of the island is actually belonging to Indonesia and it's called Kalimantan. And over on the far side of the world, the other side of the world, next slide. In America, we're going to be into New England, and Here's Crow has a story that she is attributing to Vermont, because that's where the teller who told it to her was from. Jonathan is telling a story from Martha's Vineyard, which is a tiny island in comparison, certainly with Borneo there. And PapaJoe will be sharing a story that comes from the West Coast, California. So I hope that's just kind of given people their geography for the evening. I know that I was kind of like, Martha's Vineyard, I've heard of that, but I couldn't place it on the map. So it's great. While airlines around the world are really struggling, thanks to our flights of fancy, we can still travel free and safely wherever we wish to go. So I wanted to just begin by explaining how this event came about, because it is rather very different from our usual FEAST story sessions or story swaps. It was only last month, it just seems ridiculous how quickly this has happened, that I saw Here's Crow for the very first time, sharing a story on the WVSG story swap. If you don't know, it's the first Thursday night of the month at 8:30, which for us here in Singapore is 8:30 on the Friday morning. So it's actually quite a comfortable time. They do have other slots, other sessions appealing to different time zones, but that's the one that I heard, Here's Crow. And she mentioned that she tells tales from the Longhouse. And immediately my ears picked up, because quite coincidentally, both Regina and Cassandra had emailed me to say that they had a story that they wanted to share on the FEAST April story swap, because our theme was Tales from Asia. And this just seemed to be so serendipitous that I then contacted Hope Lewis, and through her was able to get in touch with Here's Crow and pitch this idea. And it's really come about in an incredibly short amount of time. So all I wanted to say is that while I'm really happy and excited that this has come about, the one regret that I have is that there are many of you joining, and I suspect for a lot of you, this is the very first time that you are interacting with FEAST or participating in a FEAST event. And yet, quite extraordinarily, there are no ethnic Asians actually telling in this event. And for those of you who are regular participants, you know that it's just ridiculous. So at the end of this session, I will be sharing with you details of that. We have 4 storytelling events coming up in the next 2 weeks, actually, all of which showcase the amazing diversity of Asian storytelling talent that we are very proud to have here in FEAST. So, having given you that kind of background as to why we're here and how this came about, I'm now going to go over to Regina, because it is tradition, I gather, within the kind of indigenous gatherings, to begin with some kind of invocation or prayer to bring well wishes upon the meeting. Regina.
Thank you, Roger. This is given in gratitude to and prayers for the native peoples of Borneo and for the native peoples of North America, whose stories we are sharing today. And it's a Dayak prayer that I was taught, very simple. May you be healthy and content. May you be safe and cool. And may you be blessed with a long life to protect the land. So may we all be healthy and content, safe, cool, blessed with a long life, protect the land, and have a wonderful time this morning or this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And with that, now, as I say, we have 6 stories, and we're going to ping pong backwards and forwards. We're going to start in America, and then we'll come across to Sabah, then back to the States, then back over to Sarawak that way. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Here's Crow to share with us your story. And we decided it was much better if the tellers did their own introductions. So over to you, Here's Crow. Thank you so much. Oh, love your picture. Wow.
Thank you.
Great house.
I started with this one. I am Here's Crow. In our language, it's Papakiskan Natawao Kalkantawa, but you're probably better off just calling me Crow. It's a mouthful and it never fits on a computer form. I am, my husband found this particular picture. This is actually quite unusual because the longhouses can hold in this country. They are on the ground, they're not raised up, but they can hold up to, in the Northeast, 10, 15 families over the course of a winter. So they would be very long houses. This house would probably hold probably 2 families, few kids, and I have other pictures that I chose not to use just to give you an idea, because I've seen the long houses over there. So I thought I should show you a picture of what the long houses look like here. And that's for that. Anyway, that's my longhouse, our longhouse, or one of them. And what I'd like to do is fairly traditional in this country, and that is to offer everyone here a welcoming song. I was taught that this color purple and a song were what was before Creator, Kalpantawit, God, lit up the sun in this solar system. And when that happened, there came a light that drew all of his children, the planets, to him as he sang this song. So this song is to welcome all of you into this circle. It is important for a storyteller to learn over the years how to step into the story, not just to give it, but to be walking it while it's being told. In addition, if you work really hard and you've got an audience that's really with you, you can get them to step into the story with you. And that's how they continue through all the generations. Hand to hand, mouth to mouth, mouth to ear. And so these stories are older than probably any of us know. And this is the greeting song. We're just going to do one push-up, and then I'm going to tell you the story of how the talking stick came to be, which is a very early form of Native American democracy. Okay. This is a water drum. It's very different than most of the other drums you will see as Native American. Out in the West, they have big kettle drums with 6 guys around them singing really loud. And we always joke that in heaven there's this racket that goes on all the time, and it's because the guys from the plains think that their drum is the only one up there. This, however, is an Eastern drum. It's filled with water. I don't know if you can hear it, but that's what changes the pitch of the drum. So we're going to sing one push-up to welcome everybody, because everyone has a place in this circle. Hey, 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 oh. 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 Normally, that song would be done 4 times, one for each of the 4 cardinal directions. It's a portion, a foundation for many Native American tribes to have an underlying connection, and the songs often do that for us, as do our stories. So, I'm going to do a certain amount of Native American Sign Language with this story. It is not like American Sign Language that is used for the hard of hearing. If 2 people met each other on the path, they could be enemies, they could be friends. Sometimes you could tell from paint or outfit what clan they were from. Other times you couldn't. So one of the things that was done was this. First thing you did. First of all, you show that your hand is empty. And this is sign language for friend. And the other person, hopefully, would do this. And then everybody would do this. I have no knife. I have nothing but me to bring to you. So I'm all going to teach you real quickly a greeting in sign language. So they meet on the path. First man says, I'm a friend. Second man says, I'm a friend. First man says, I have food. Question, are you hungry? And the other man, yes, or, which is the sign for yes. And they might then smoke. They would have a pipe. They would eat together. They would talk, and they would both continue on their journeys. It allowed a landmass with hundreds of languages, because there's not an Indian people. There's lots of clans, traditions, tribes, confederacies. And so this allowed us to expand our circles and include more people and come to increase our trade. In the beginning, and when that was, who knows, but it was a long, long, long time ago. The creator, Kautantuit, God, had sent many wonderful things to the people. One day, there was a council meeting in the house. Now, this is council, this is house. And there was a very brave young man who had just earned his seat in the Longhouse Council. But This one day, like so many days, you're missing part of the sign. Let me get up a little farther. There we go. So many days, all this young man, and his name, by the way, was Good Heart. And Good Heart was listening to all the quarreling and the fighting that was going on inside the Longhouse. Everybody was quarreling. No one could hear what others were saying because it was so noisy. He wanted to speak, but he knew that no one would be able to hear his words. So it was with a sad heart that he left the Longhouse that day. He walked to his Witu in the village, his individual house, and he got his pipe and his tobacco, and he walked down to the river. There, he laid an altar, and he began to pray with the pipe. And he said, Creator, I ask you to help me guide the people. I am small, and there is much I do not understand. Help me do the work to guide the people. And as he sat in the forest, he sat underneath a tree because he knew that sometimes a prayer can take a very long time before it gets answered. So there he sat, looking at the beautiful day. He reached down and picked up a stick. And as he picked up the stick, he realized that all the other relatives, the other animals, were completely silent. Before, they'd been chirping and squawking and speaking and growling to one another, having perfectly respectful conversations. But when he held this stick, was all he heard. Now he was so astonished that he stood up and dropped the stick. And all of a sudden, all the other relatives are chirping, beeping, all slithering along the ground, not paying any attention to him. Well, he thought that was quite odd. So he sat back down again, leaned against the tree, and not thinking, picked up the stick and started peeling the bark off it. And I'm sure you know what happened next. Silence. And they all turned their heads and looked right at him as if expecting him to speak. Now he was starting to catch on. Without moving very much, he very slowly took that stick, the branch from a tree, and put it on the ground. And everybody started talking again. Now, Good Heart began to smile because he understood what Creator was telling him. He had the answer to his prayer. He was so excited that he thanked all of the relatives, grabbed the stick, and ran as fast as he could straight back to the village. And he went right into the middle of the council. He went into the Longhouse and walked straight up to the elders who were sitting And he said, please listen to me. I have been out and prayed, and I have been blessed with a gift for the people. Please let me speak at this council. And the oldest of the elders stood up. Needless to say, it takes a little time as you get older, but stood up and said to all the people, quiet down. Creator has sent a messenger. Good heart must speak. Now the people who were at that council were silent. When an elder says it's time to be quiet, just do it. When Goodheart stepped up to speak to the people, they had never seen him so brave. He was not shy anymore because he knew the truth of Creator's intention. And so he told them what he had seen when he came into the council house in the morning. All the quarreling and the fighting. He said, Creator has given you a gift. And he showed them the stick, and everybody was like, we got a stick? Well, yes, because this stick holds a responsibility. As it is passed around to each person here, they have a chance to speak. It allows those that are shy to have a turn where they can speak without interrupting anyone. And for people who talk constantly and they get a hold of the stick, the other people can look at them and just keep looking at them till they realize what they're doing, and then they'll pass the stick. And if you have to excuse yourself, you do that in between the stick. He'd figured that much out because he'd had to make a quick stop on the way back. This tradition from that day until today has been part of the Native Indians of Turtle Island. And so it will continue as long as people remember to respect, because you respect the person who speaks. And always remember that anything you have to say, you already know. So listening is a really good thing. Oh.
Hey.
Oh. Thank you so much. Wow.
I do have one thing, Roger.
Yeah.
I did forget one thing. My apologies. A talking stick can be a small, thin beaver stick. This is mine, very plain. I had a child I told stories to who thought I needed one that was more colorful. So I also have one wrapped in yarn by a 9-year-old. I use this one the most.
I'm sure.
This could also be a talking stick. Some of them were very fancy with feathers and beads and sometimes parts of an animal that was a teacher to the person who carried this stick. And as I say, it was passed around. And that's the earliest form of democracy that I know of. And the story comes from many different clans, which is why I cannot give you the source and why I tell tales from the Longhouse, because lots of clans in the Longhouse use the stick and claim it. Thank you. Now I'm done.
Thank you so much, Iskra. I love that. And particularly, just at the start, when you were explaining about the reason for sign language and how it was just a way that there were so many strangers meeting, and sign language enabled us, or enabled them, to expand their circles and to include more people. And surely that is what we're also doing tonight, and through these kinds of sessions where we are able to cross these incredible divides. So thank you very much for sharing that. And may I say also, compliments to everybody, because everybody was listening and I didn't hear any strange noises interrupting that. So well done, everybody. Okay, so let's now zoom to the east, and Cassandra, how are you?
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hello,
Welcome. Hello.
Cassandra.
Welcome.
You're looking great.
Thank you. I first learned sign language when I was 5 years old at my school, in my first term of school. And I thought to myself, even at the age of 5, wouldn't it be great if everybody learned sign language? Then we could talk to one another. Not much has changed, Roger. Not much has changed.
True.
I want you to imagine that there is an island in the midst of the South China Sea. And at the north of that island, there is a mountain that goes up and up and up towards the sky. And the mountain is covered with flowers. And at the bottom of the mountain, there is a forest of trees so tall, they reach towards the sky and block the sun. And if you were to walk into that forest, you might just find a river. And if you were to follow that river, you might just find a village. What remains of a village, the old longhouses huddled together beside the river bank. And one small house set apart by itself. And in that house, there once lived a woman and her child. The husband, he had died when the baby was so young, before he could remember. And the woman, she carried her baby with her always, and they did everything together. As soon as she was able, she put him on her back, and together at dawn, they would walk through the cool of the forest and out into the clearing that she and her husband and all the villagers had made. And there, with her baby on her back, she would work from dawn to dusk, planting the rice and harvesting the vegetables for them to eat. And the villagers said, "Give us the baby, we'll look after him for you." But she said, "No, he's all I have with my husband. We belong together, and there is so much for him to learn. Well, who knows how long we'll have together." And as soon as the baby was old enough, holding his mother hand, he would toddle through the forest and over the sticks and grass, and then out into the clearing, into the hot, sticky mud. He would bend and pull up the rice and stretch to reach to harvest the vegetables and fruit. And they were always together. But the time they had together was shorter than you might think. For one day the woman got sick, and she went to the herdman in the village and she asked for his help. And he looked at all the hundreds of plants and fruits that there are in the rainforest, but none of them were any good for the woman. And so she worked even harder to make sure there was a store of food for her son when she was gone. But she wondered, how would he manage all on his own? And at night, too exhausted to sleep, she would lie on the mat beside him and stroke his head and push back his hair. And she wondered and wondered, what could she do to help him not to feel so alone when she had gone? And then one night, the moon shone and glimmered and touched his forehead. And she looked up. And when she looked at the moon, she came up with a plan. And so the next night, she sat with her boy beside her, her arm around him, and she said, look. And the moon was full. And she said, can you see the moon? And he nodded yes. And she said, look carefully. Can you see the shadow on the moon? And he nodded yes. And she said, doesn't that shadow look like a woman? And the boy sort of nodded yes. And she said, that shadow soon will be me. I have to leave you here on earth, but I will not leave you. I will be up there on the moon. Do not worry. You will not be on your own. The little boy looked at his mother, somewhat puzzled, but he looked up at the moon and he nodded. He didn't fully understand. He was so young. But soon, the woman was too sick to go out into the forest. And the boy went by himself, and he was so proud to come back with the food that he had grown. And he made a fire, and he lit it, and he cooked for her, and he fed her when she was too weak to feed herself. And then when she was too weak to eat, he gently spooned the water into her mouth. And then one night, she lay looking up at him, and her eyes smiled at him. And she said, remember the moon. And then she closed her eyes, and she was gone. And the boy, he was inconsolable. He rocked and cried and rocked and cried, and the villagers came in and they gently prized her from his grasp, and they washed her, and they covered her with cloth, and they took her out and buried her. And then they took her son by the hand back to the Longhouse, so he would not be on his own. But he would not stay with them, the rest of the village, no. As soon as they were asleep, he was up and out of the window and back in his own house. And he did what his mother said. He kept looking out at the window, trying to see her on the moon. And he did all the things his mother had taught him, but it was so hard, and he was so young. It wasn't so bad in the daytime. There were other people about while he was growing the food. But when he came back home and looked up at the moon, she wasn't there. For the moon, of course, was waning, growing smaller and smaller, and he couldn't see the shadow. She wasn't there. Until one night, it was all too much for him. He took one look at the moon, and then he turned and went inside and slammed the door. The next day, the villagers came out and they found the door barred and the window shut. And they knocked, but there was no answer. They left food for him, but he did not eat. And the nights passed until at last the moon was full once again. No ordinary moon, but what they called a supermoon, for it was so close to the earth, you could almost touch it, almost. And that night, the villagers heard strange sounds from inside the house, the sounds of an animal beating against the wall. And they ran and they broke down the door and something flew out, a silver bird. But where was the boy? They looked inside. He was gone. Look! One of the villagers pointed to the bird. And the silver owl had around its left foot a bracelet like the boy had worn. And the silver bird, the owl, looked up at the moon, looked and looked and looked, And then it raised its wings and beat them once, twice, and then was gone.
Yeah, really. Wow, what a wonderful story, Cassandra. I was just trying to imagine what that would be like if you were sat, you know, in the Longhouse and either lit by firelight or with an oil lamp, you know, and you were hearing a member of your community tell that story, and the sound of the forest is just outside the window. I've got the goosebumps here, and I'm sat here in the comfort of my air-conditioned room. Beautiful, beautiful. And I love the way too that, again, having the moon behind you was great. And we had a super moon here very recently too. Quite astonishing. So red, and as you say, it felt so close that you could almost touch it. Wonderful.
That bit of the story was from you, Roger. When you mentioned it, I went, "It's a supermoon. Of course it is."
There we go.
What would I do? What would I be without you, Roger?
Again, it's how we draw and give each other ideas, and these things help to just colour a particular telling of the story. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So now, Cassandra, as she said, I've known her for almost 20 years. Jonathan, I don't think I've even sort of known for more than 20 minutes, apart from when we had a chat the other day as we were talking about this. So it's great to have you with us, Jonathan, and over to you.
Well, thank you. And believe it or not, Cassandra and I have never met, but you'll see that there's some remarkable parallels between the story she just told and mine, which comes to me through a storyteller named Medicine Story, and then a teller named Wolf Song that I grew up getting to listen to in the area around Lake Champlain in Vermont. And this story came to me with a bit of a call and response typically. So when I would say ho, you would say hey back. So ho.
Hey.
Hey.
Right. So a long time ago, on the island of No Pay, which today is known as Martha's Vineyard, there lived an old man and an old woman. And they'd been together for a long time. They were good to each other, kind, generous with each other, and with the people of their village. When she would grow her garden and weave her baskets, she'd always collect a little bit more and weave one extra to help others to lighten their load. And the old man, when he would go down to the sea to fish, he would catch what he needed for himself and a few more to share. And likewise, when he went to gather in the forest. And as happens when we get to the later portions of our lives, one night they were sitting by their fire and they were reflecting on all that had come to them down through the years. And the woman saying, you know, we have lived mostly good lives and I've been happy, except there is one thing I sometimes regret. I regret that I did not bring a child into this world to see our love walking with the people. The old man said, yes, I know what you speak of. But let us not dwell on this one thing. Let us just continue and share with each other the joy that we have known. And the days went on and the nights went on. And one night, they were awoken by a strange sound. And the man lifted the skin on the door of the lodge and looked out. Couldn't see anything. A strange noise came again, and he looked down at his feet. And there was a deerskin bundle. And he brought it inside and unwrapped it. And there was a newborn child, so fresh that it was still wet to the touch. And this was a strange thing, because in this long ago time, the women, they knew the ways of themselves and of the medicines, and they did not throw away children. And they knew that no one in the village had recently given birth and that no one was expecting anytime soon. But still, they went to the midwife and asked if anyone had given birth or what might have happened. And she said, no, there's no one expecting, and no one is for quite some time. So they realized that this child came to them in a very unusual way. They even went back to their lodge and searched for tracks, and they couldn't find anything. So they took the child and raised it as their own. And they raised it with all the love and care that they'd shown to each other and to their people. And it started to grow and to crawl and then stand and to walk. And before long, she would join them and join her mother in the garden, or join her father at the sea. And like with her parents, she learned to collect a little bit extra to share. And when someone is raised with that kind of love and joy in their life, often they get an inner spark in their eyes, so that regardless of what they look like on the outside, that light shines through. You might say that, yes, that person is truly easy to look at. And so it was with this young woman who had come to them on a night with a full moon. And so the people had named her Daughter of the Moon. Mm-hmm. Her joy and her light was starting to spread to the people, and word of her was traveling. In fact, it had even reached the mainland. And a young chief there, he had already shown that he was a good hunter, that he could feed his people, and that he was courageous and brave and could defend his people. But he knew to become a good chief and to be respected the way his father had and his father before him, that he would have to have a good wife to help him with his people. And so he thought, perhaps it is time I get married. And word of Daughter of the Moon had reached him that I shall go see about this woman. So he gathered up all the gifts that he could of his people, and he went down to the shore, and he read the sky and the water until he knew the time was right. And he made the crossing all by himself, all the way out to the island of No Pay. And he gave his gifts, and he met with the people, and before long, he learned where the lodge of the old couple was, and Daughter of the Moon. And he went there, and he came with some manly questions for the father about where the good fishing is, where the clam beds are, where to find this or that medicine. And all the while he was asking these questions, the old man noticed his gaze kept turning to Daughter of the Moon. The young chief thought, yes, what I've heard is true. She truly is easy to look at. And same with the woman when he would ask about when to plant this or that crop, where to find the best reeds for the baskets. His eyes would also turn to Daughter of the Moon. And the old people were wise. They could see how it was with him. And before long, he came and he said, I have a question of you. I would like to speak of marriage. And they said, Uh-huh. Well, as you've been watching her, I'm sure you can see, you'll have to ask her yourself. So we came to Daughter of the Moon and asked if she would take his hand. She said, "Young chief, I am very honored by your question, but I must say no. I am not of this place or of these people. I came here to give this couple the one thing that they had not had. I cannot stay. I will have to leave this place." Now, young chief, oh,
Hey,
there you go. Now, young chief, he'd succeeded at pretty much everything he set his mind to from quite a young age. And he figured there must be some way that he could get Daughter of the Moon to take his hand. So he stayed and he asked more questions. He started to help to tend the gardens, and to fish, and to help collect a little bit extra, and to spend more time getting to know Daughter of the Moon. And eventually, Daughter of the Moon said, "Young chief, I see who you are. I will be your wife, but it must be in the way of my choosing. I will pick the day, and from that day, we will have one cycle of the seasons, 13 moons time, and then I must go." My young chief was ecstatic. He thought, surely, in one cycle of the seasons, 13 moons time, I will get to know her so well that I can make her stay. Oh,
hey,
Hey,
so they came together. She picked the night of a full moon, and the people built them a lodge. And they came together as a couple. And young chief found a joy he had not known before. They came together as lovers and companions and friends. They tended their own gardens. She wove her own baskets. He harvested from the sea. And before long, they even found themselves a favorite place. A place up on the cliffs at a place that is today known as Gayhead. It looks out over the water, and they would sit and they would watch the sunsets over the mainland and the moon rise above the sea. And the moons came and the moons went, and they were very happy together. But before long, Daughter of the Moon turned to young chief and she said, "Young chief, in a few days' time, the moon will rise. And from that day, we will have one cycle of the moon, and then I must go." And for the first time since young chief was a very small child, he knew fear. For as great as everything he had been, he still had not found a way to make her stay. He said, "Daughter of the Moon, it has been quite some time since I have seen my people and my parents. I shall return to them and let them know that I will be with them again soon." She could see that he was troubled and see his pain, so she let him go. But he said, "I will return to say until we meet again." So he went back to his people, but he wasn't there to see his parents. He went and he found the oldest person amongst his people, a woman that was so old that the next oldest person could never remember her having been young. And young chief told her the story of Daughter of the Moon. He said, "Surely there must be something I can do to make her stay." Oh,
hey,
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 and the elder, she said, "Young chief, I'm sorry, but there is no good way you can make her stay." Now, young chief did not like hearing this, so he went to the next people over, who had an elder that was so old that even the elder in his village couldn't remember that person being young. And he told this elder his story. He said, "Surely I can make her stay." He said, "No, young chief, there is no good way." He went to the next people and the next people. No, young chief, there is no good way you can make her stay. Finally, he found the oldest person in all the area, a person that was so old that it made the old trees seem to stand tall and unwrinkled. And he told this person, this elder, this story. He said, surely there is something I can do to make her stay. The elder said, young chief, there is no good way. The young chief, at this point, had turned so far inward to his pain that he had lost the cycle of the moon. He realized if he did not hurry, he would not keep his promise to return and say, until we meet again. So he ran back to the shore, got into his canoe, began to paddle, only looking inward at his pain. He did not look to read the water or to the sky, to read the clouds. And the storm rolled in. And they say anyone else would have perished and would have been lost. But young chief had the strength and the wisdom to ride out the storm. But it blew him 2 days out to sea. For 2 days, he had to summon the strength to make it back to Nopay. Oh.
Hey.
And when he reached Nopay, he went to his lodge. The daughter of the moon was nowhere to be seen. He went and he felt the fire, and it had grown cold. And in his fear, in his grief, in his reflection, he remembered their place up on Gay Head, and he knew where he could find her. And he ran with a speed and a strength he had never known. And as he approached the cliffs, the moon rose above the sea. And the moonbeam reached down and touched the edge of the cliffs. His daughter of the moon began to walk out onto that moonbeam. And he cried, wait, don't go, stay. Daughter of the moon turned back, said, young chief, I've only been true to you, and we've only been true with each other. I cannot stay. But I leave you with a gift. She bent down and she scooped up a handful of that moonbeam. She scattered it to 1,000 dancing lights. And she stood halfway between this world and the sky world. And then she turned and was gone. Young chief, he did as daughter of the moon had asked before she left. He remembered the joy that they had together and the advice that she said to go back and be with his people and to become a leader that she knew he could be. He even found a wife and grew old and became a good chief for his people. And as an old man, young chief would tell the story of daughter of the moon. And he would say, see, the fireflies, they are the gift of daughter of the moon. See them and remember. Thank you. Ole.
Thank you so much. Lovely, lovely. And this, again, there's just certain phrases that, like, I just love the line, read the water and the sky. That it immediately just to me suggests another, we talked at the start about this connection with the land in the invocation that Regina mentioned, to look after the land, and there's a connection that people who can do that and for whom that is so important, to read the sky and the water. Beautiful story, beautiful story. And yes, it was great. Isn't serendipity a wonderful thing? That connection between the moon in those two stories that wasn't planned at all. Just a wonderful accident of association. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Regina, it's great to have you back and sharing this part of this epic story. So thank you.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, and I am going to tell a very small snippet of a very long story, but this small snippet is from the first section of the story, which is about love and marriage. So we're continuing that thread, although it's going to be very different. Very quick background: in around 1970, a young poet and dancer, Carol Rubenstein, found herself in Borneo. Her poetry heard poetry. She managed to get grants and stay for 3 years. And she had interpreters, and she visited 7 groups in the rainforest and recorded and translated, and all of the material is in Monograph's museum. When she and I got together, she said, "Oh, I have a story for you." And she gave me to tell an old epic called Adi Song of Agan. When she was with the Kalabit in the uplands of Sarawak, she was collecting chants to rice and love poetry, and suddenly a woman arrived and said, "I hear someone's interested in the old songs," because all of this poetry, all of the literature was chanted. "I hear someone's actually interested in the old songs." And so this woman, Niyar Ayu, chanted for 2 nights in the Longhouse. And she had learned it orally from her mother-in-law. And when Carol went away, and when Carol came back to Borneo in 1985, so all of that happened around 1971, she met with Niarayu again, who said she had never again sung it in its entirety because a group of outsiders came, did some nice things for the tribe, but also banned all singing of old songs, lest it incite the people to their old way. And so Niarayu never sang it again. And as far as she knew, nobody else knew it. So I am so honored to be able to share pieces of it with you. It's way too long to do in this little section. So we're going to meet our hero, Agan, and a couple of the women. The women in the story are wonderfully strong. Kalabit like strong women, as Carol would say. So we're just going to have a taste. Agan, yak tung bong, was sitting on the veranda of the Longhouse. He was bent over some work he was doing. Agan was carving the handle for his parang, his knife. He had just come back from fierce battle. Agan's hair was straight and smooth cut across his forehead in a straight line. His eyebrows were plucked out with iron tweezers so that the thin skin above the eyes was made clear. And his eyes shone like damar lamps. His eyes shone like the stars in the sky. His earlobes long and hanging. They swung forward in spirals below his neck, and in each of his earlobes, half of the moon shone. The veranda, bent over his work, suddenly thought he heard something fall. He looked and he saw a message stick made of silver, big as a log. Agan said, "Message stick. Message stick, what is your message? Who are you? Where are you from? Message stick, am I invited to go tuba fishing and stun the fish at the bathing place? Message stick, am I invited to parade around the Longhouse 8 times, dancing to celebrate the raising of a tall ulung from which to hang a head?" And the message stick said, "I am the message stick, you be quiet, I will speak." I am a message stick. I am a message stick from Tirabalong. Tirabalong has one beloved young daughter, young Dayang Karit Tirabalong. He invites you to come and take her for your wife. Agan put the message stick, he slipped it between the atop roof leaves. And each day he untied one of the knots on the stick. And at the end of 5 days, Agan put on his tiger skin cloak with the feathers attached to it. Agan placed on his head the cap, his headdress. It was the face of the tiger stretched so that the nostrils were big, so that the fangs overhung above and below, so that its eyes were gleaming. The young man was white as a shell. The young man gleamed like the moon, and the white shell fastened to the front of his tiger skin cloak gleamed. It was huge. It stretched beyond his outflung arms. The shell was still alive. The shell gleamed up to his neck. The shell gleamed down below his knees. The shell gleamed beyond his ribs. Agan took his spear and his shield, and he began to walk along the veranda of the Longhouse. When Agan walked, the sound of his footsteps could be heard. His footsteps made the whole Longhouse shake. And also heard as he walked along the veranda, the calling sound of a dakan, the spirit of the tiger skin cloak. Agan came to the end of the Longhouse. He found the notched log on to the ground. He walked from the village and up into the mountains. And there he set down his spear and his shield. And he called out, "Ngai bird, where are you? Ngai bird, you bird whose advice I ask whenever I take a journey. My mission cannot be hidden." One mid-morning, a message stick came. It came from Tirabalong, asking me to take his beloved young daughter, Gayan Karit Tirabalong, to be my wife. Oh, Ngai bird, your magic, I need your magic. Tell me, will the girl accept me? If she will accept me, Ngai bird will come to me. If she will not want me, then darkness will fall and no Ngai bird will be seen. Ngai bird, I wait your message. And he sat down and he waited. He waited for the bird. Ngai bird, where are you? Are you in the sky, in the corner between one sky and the next sky? Ngai bird, where are you? Are you in the waterfall, in the steep waterfall overlapping like fish gills? Ngai bird. The sun went across the sky and no bird was seen. Darkness was coming. He knew it. He thought maybe I should go back. Maybe I should turn around, but just then, he heard the call of the Ngai bird. Oh, it was very high up and very far away. Oh, and it was flying to the left. A bad sign. Oh, the bird was beautiful. The bird was beautiful, like a spear pushed into the ground was Agan's wonderment, reaching the sky. This bird was beautiful, eyes like Laputan beads with straight holes, beak of silver for pecking its food, beating wings of fine aban cloth, legs of silver for resting on branches. This bird was beautiful, but it was flying in the wrong direction. He thought back and forth in his heart, well, perhaps I should turn around. Perhaps I should go back. But if I do, they will all speak about me. They will all talk about me. They will gossip about me. In the village, they will say the girl refused me. I will not go back. I will not. I will go forward whether I die or not. But I don't think I'll go over the mountain. I will go instead by boat. From behind his ear, Agan took his aki bead boat, his beautiful boat made of fine, tiny aki beads. Agan got into the boat and he went down the river. The water was flowing very slowly, but Gon paddled strongly. With one stroke of the paddle, he was around 10 bends of the river. With one stroke of the paddle, he was over the feet of 10 mountains. Now, sitting on the veranda of her house on the flat land by the river was Liba'o Buduk Luyan. She was bent over some work she was doing, but she was thinking back and forth in her heart without speaking. The sun has gotten very hot. This is a sign somebody well known is coming. She put down her work, opened the roof opening and looked out. Oh, and there on the river was a young man in a boat, a young man with a big parang, a young man who made the river gleam, the banks of the river gleamed in his light. Who is this person coming down the river? He is all one can desire. How big and white are the tiger's teeth he wears in his ears. This must be a Gon who is this very day to marry Diane. This would make both of their hearts rejoice, and I would hate for her to be happy. Liba'o took up her bag of possessions. She rushed down the veranda. She leapt over the notched log onto the ground, and she ran along the flatland by the river. Liba'o ran on the ground. Agon was going by boat, but Liba'o ran so fast, she outpaced him. He was left far behind, and she got to the girls' longhouse. Liba'o rushed up the notched log, rushed down the veranda, and there in the middle of the longhouse was the ladder up into the loft. This girl, Diane Karit Tirabalang, had been living and working in this loft since she was born, a closely guarded child. Liba'o went up the ladder, and there was a huge tawak god, 2 of them chained together. This is where the girl was. Liba'o said, magic, make this chain soften and fall to the ground, and it did. And she opened the gong. What fool has undone me? What fool has undone me and come into my space? It is I, Liba'o. I'm your friend. I say you to you, but what is your name? Oh, no. She whose longhouse it is should be first to say her name. What is your name? Do you truly not know my name? I am Diane Karit Tirabalang. Yes, well, I am Liba'o, and I have come to tell you this. Your mother doesn't want you anymore. And your father doesn't want you anymore. They say you've gotten too soft because you've stayed inside this gong. Oh, Adui, is this true? Oh, yes. You can believe me. I am your friend, Liba'o. Adui. The girl took a basket and filled it with cloths for her body. She went down the ladder, down to the longhouse, her mother asleep by the fire. She stomped past as loudly as she could, but her mother didn't awaken. Where was her going? She went out on the veranda, and she walked along, and there was her father. He was asleep. She stomped past him as loudly as she could. He did not notice her or awaken. The girl came to the end of the veranda and went down the notched log, stepped onto the ground, and walked out of the village. And up in the loft, Liba'o Buduk Luyan took the place of Guyane and waited for a gone.
You can't leave it there.
It's a long, complicated story. There are two sets of lovers, a comic with many people, and a lot of wife swapping later on.
I was just about to say this is a fabulous Sarawak soap, isn't it? But oh my goodness, we're all just kind of like, oh, and you play the wicked woman so wonderfully. Really, absolutely.
That's him. He's got those tiger's teeth in his ears, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I'm trying to imagine how that would be like if it's being sung, because there's so much drama in the story, and you drive it forward magnificently there. And again, it's so vivid. I love like the details of the notched step, you know, in the log to come down from the Longhouse. And again, the taking the boat from behind his ear, it just kind of suddenly goes into this magical world there.
Well, it's operating on, you know, like all great old stories, it's operating on a lot of levels. So there's a lot of reality going on. And then there's things like this, or the witch. I mean, she convinces everybody in the Longhouse she's Diane, even though she doesn't look like her.
Yes.
And
So how long, I've got a question here. Pretty's saying that she wants to hear the whole thing. So how long does it take you to do the whole thing?
Well, I've never well, first of all, I have to say that I tell it, I'm not singing. I do have the tape. I've heard, you know, the tape, the original. This doesn't sound like it at all. I've done an hour and 45 minutes of it, which is the first section, which I call Love and Marriage. Yeah. And then the second section, he is challenged to war, and you take heads in that second section. The third section I've never actually told is when everybody kind of gets together and sorts it all out. Probably if I told the whole thing, it would be 2.5 hours, but that's the way I tell it. You know, doing all the repetitions is poetry. So, but I've done an hour and 45 minutes of it, and it works.
Sure, I can imagine. What a great story. And just before, thank you so much, Regina. Before we go over to PapaJoe, I just want to give a shout out to one of our strong women, Yip Ping, who is in Kuching in Sarawak. Okay, and it's I don't see you here on the screen, but it's really great that you're with us, and we should catch up. I'd love to hear how things are going there. And hopefully we will get to Sarawak one day for our conference. Okay. So now let us zoom back the other way and say hi to PapaJoe. Hello there, sir.
Good morning, folks, or good evening, wherever you might be. This time in the world is very different, isn't it?
It is.
We've been doing East Coast stories, so we're going to move over to the West Coast, over to the Nimi tribe, which, if you're looking for it, you might find under Western Mono. And this is a story that was collected back in the 50s and has been traveling around. If you're looking for it, you might find a literary version of it in a book called Tatterhood and Other Tales. But when the world was young, when the sky was closer to the earth, there was a tribe, and there were 6 young men who grew up together. And as young men who were together often, they developed a great friendship. They were lion hunters. And they built their lodge on the side of the village, on the edge of the village. And they brought their wives into their lodges. And there were just the 6 couples. Well, one of them, the eldest wife, had a young daughter. And the men would go out every day and they would hunt the lions. And the women would gather other things, acorns, other foods that they could gather up. And one day when they had gathered enough acorns to make the food they needed for the winter, where they made their flour from, they decided that they would go to the pines and gather some pine nuts. And as they were going out there, they saw a elk chewing on some greens. And when they came up toward it, it ran away. Well, they went over toward the greens and they saw these beautiful purple flowers on long stems with 2 long leaves. And there was a strange smell coming from them. It didn't smell as sweet as they would expect from flowers. It wasn't really flowery at all. And so the eldest wife, she snipped off a little bit of the flower and she tasted it. It was incredible, she said. Oh, it's the perfect mixture of spicy and sweet. And so the other wives tasted it also, and they loved this flower. And then they ate the flower and they started eating the stems and the leaves too. The whole plant seemed to be edible. And so they started to dig some up to bring it back to their village. And they found these egg-shaped balls at the bottom of the plant. And when they broke open the skin of these balls, out came this incredible odor. They'd never smelled anything like it. And when they tasted that, oh, the strength of the flavor was in the root. So they gathered up a lot of them and they brought them back to the village. And they made a big soup. And the soup cooked and the steam came up and spread out to the village. Well, their husbands eventually came home. They had taken 2 lions that day. They were very proud. But when they came into the village, they were, oh, what is that stench? Did something go rotten? Well, the wife said, oh, no, we found a new food. It's delicious. Come and try it. Well, the husbands wanted nothing to do with that food. It stinks, and you stinks too. Oh, sleep outside tonight. And the women had to sleep outside the lodges that night. It was cold and it was uncomfortable for them. And the next day the husband said, no more of those things. We have to go off. Well, they went off. But the women, they loved this new plant they had found and decided that they needed some fresh plants to eat. And so they headed back up into the pines and they ate. And they ate and they ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Then they headed home and started preparing supper for their husbands. Well, this day was different. For even though their husbands had always caught at least 1 lion every day, this day they caught nothing. And they were not in a good mood at all when they got there. And that smell was there again. They're, wives, what are you doing? Oh, come, just try it. Once you've tasted it, oh, you won't mind the smell at all. But the husbands wanted nothing to do with it. And now they wanted nothing to do with their wives either. And so they made them sleep outside the lodges again. Again, the women slept in the cold and uncomfortably. And the next day, it happened just the same way. As soon as the men went off hunting, the women went out and ate their onions, for that's what they were. And they ate onions until they couldn't eat anymore. And when they got home, they prepared a supper for their husbands, which was not appreciated at all. For when the husbands came back again, they hadn't caught a thing. They said, women, don't you understand? The stench of this food is driving the animals away. We'll never catch anything as long as you keep picking those stupid things. But the women loved the onions, and they wouldn't stop. So night after night, the men made them sleep outside of the lodge. Night after night, they were cold and uncomfortable. And, well, after 6 days and 6 nights, the men were so angry at their wives. The women were so angry at their husbands that there wasn't even a question of where they would sleep. And the next morning, the 7th morning, when the men went out, the women gathered their ropes, their very special magic ropes, ropes woven from eagle feathers and willow bark and milkweed. And when they had their ropes ready, they carried them up to the hill and they gathered all the onions they could gather into their bags. And then they stood on a large rock, and the eldest wife, who had brought her daughter along with her, said, let us sing. And the women began to sing, and as they sang, those ropes began to dance. And the women sang and sang, and the ropes rose up into the sky, and they latched across the cloud, and the two ends dangled down. And they tied the ropes together, and all the women stood on the ends of their ropes, and they sang, and the ropes rose, and the ropes danced, and the women sang, and the ropes and the women danced, higher and higher, circling around and around, and it rose higher and higher. Now the mothers and the fathers of these women were in that village, and they saw the 6 women and that little girl going up into the sky, and they called them back. Please come back. They offered them pine nuts. They offered them anything. Please just come home. But the young wives, they were not interested in coming back. They were so angry at their husbands. They kept singing, and the rope rose higher and higher. Well, eventually the men came back. And they were still angry and disgruntled because still they hadn't caught anything. But when they saw their wives flying up into the sky, oh, they had a different concern. And they turned to their parents and they said, "How did you let them go?" But the parents couldn't stop them. So the men, they gathered up their eagle feather ropes, and they carried them up to the boulder, and they lay them out, and they listened to the song, and they copied it. And as they sang the song, the ropes went up and hooked over the cloud. The men stood on the end of the rope. They sang, and the rope spun round and round, and the men danced and sang into the sky, following their wives. Well, the women looked back, and they saw their husbands coming after them. They said, "Go back, we don't want you anymore." The men said, "Please come back, we want you so much." But the women wouldn't listen. And they never wanted to give up those onions. They never wanted to take commands from their husbands again. And so they kept on singing. But the husbands' voices were louder and stronger, and their rope was beginning to catch up. But the women's magic was even more powerful than theirs. And so they said, "Stop!" And the men did. And the women just rose far enough up that they'd never have to worry about their husbands again. And that's the story. But at that time, those 6 women and that little girl turned into a line of stars that you can still see today. And underneath them are 7 more stars, not quite in a line. We call that Taurus. And that's the story of the onion eater. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you. I never knew that onions could be so divisive. Ah, very good.
Well, some people like them and some people don't.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and again, wonderful how we seem to have this connection between the stories and the moon and the stars also. So, okay, it comes to me to tell a story, and this story comes from Sarawak, and the character, the main character, is called Father of Aloy. There are many stories about the father of Aloy. There are, as far as I know, I've never found a story about Aloy per se. And Father of Aloy is a hunter. And of course, being from an Iban from Sarawak, he would use a blowpipe. And this is a blowpipe here. It's actually made of buffalo bone that has been carved. You can see here, this would be where you would keep the darts. This is the design, the hornbill, which is now the national bird of Sarawak. And of course, this is the business end here. Let me just, I can see that from where you would do that. I think this one is really more for display rather than actually for hunting. The real ones are longer, probably at least 1.5 meters long, in order to have that kind of accuracy if you want to catch something. So the story begins one morning when mother of Aloy got up and she went down notched steps of the log to underneath the longhouse, looking for some live meat to cook. And there was nothing. And she was not happy because while for PapaJoe, it was the women who were getting the onions, for Mother-in-law, it was her husband who was meant to be the hunter. So she went back and she woke him up and told him that he must go and get some food. Well, whatever else you can say about Father Verloy as a husband and as a father, but as a hunter, he was certainly very good. And he took his blowpipe and he took his darts, which he had prepared, the very special from the sap of the ipo tree, in order to poison the tips. And he went out into the forest, following the paths that only he knew. And soon he came to a clearing, and he was peering through the bushes, and he could see there a flock of maybe 40 or 50 birds, and they were busy feasting on the fruit and the nuts that had been shaken down during the wild winds of the night before. And so he took his blowpipe, and he took one of the darts, and he put it in, he took aim, and he fired that dart, and it hit the bird, and the bird and collapsed. And of course, the great advantage of using the blowpipe is that it is silent. And the other birds kept on peck, 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 peck. And so he, not wanting to waste an opportunity, took another dart, took aim, and again, and the bird, boom, collapsed. And Father Verloy went on, loading his darts and firing. And it was only when he had finished all his darts that he realized that he had managed to capture at least 40 birds. Now, you see, Father Verloy was the kind of man who didn't really think beyond that actual moment. How is he going to get 40 birds back to the Longhouse? He looked around and he saw that there was a patch of lalang. This is very tall grass that can be at least waist high. And just like the hero of Regina's story, he took out his parang, his long knife, and cut himself some 40 or 50 stalks of the lalang. Then he went and he tied the first stalk around his waist, picked up a bird and tied it at the ankles, and then hung it from his waist. Then took another stalk, wound it around his waist, picked up another bird, tied it up, and hung that from his waist. And so it went on until he had all the birds dangling, swinging on either side and in front of him too. And it was considerably heavy. And remember, he hadn't had breakfast really to speak of, and he thought perhaps it would be better if he took a little rest before heading back to the Longhouse. So very carefully, laying the birds out on either side of him, he lay back on the grass, put his hands behind his head, and was soon in dreamland. Now, the sap from the bark of the ipo tree, what it does, it doesn't, it's not a poison, unlike sometimes they would use the venom from a snake, for example. But no, this sap, it works like a narcotic. It puts the birds to sleep. After all, this story in the day, long before there were fridges. You don't want to have 40 birds all going, because they'd make even more of a smell than PapaJoe's onions. Yeah. So what you want is to have the meat live until you're ready to kill it and then cook it and eat it. So as he was lying there, dreaming, gradually the effect of the drug wore off, and the birds that had been prone began gradually to come back alive. And first one staggered to its feet, and then it flapped its wings. It realized it was tired. It couldn't fly away. And another bird, it also couldn't move. Then the leader of the birds was a very wise creature indeed. And presumably using a bird sign language, I have to say here's crow, conveyed to them that they all needed to work together and to fly at the same time in the same direction. And they did. And they all beat their wings at once, and it worked. They began to rise up, and they were carrying the boy with them. I don't know, I'm sure you've had that sensation. You are dreaming, and you're dreaming of flying, yes? And it was wonderful, yes. He thought, oh, this is wonderful, I'm flying. He could feel the wind in his hair. It was so relaxing. And then he opened his eyes and, oh, instead of trees above him, he saw birds. Yeah. And then with, oh my goodness me, he looked down and the trees were below him. He was flying in the wrong direction because his house was back that way and he was going higher and higher. And he thought, what can I do? Now, Father Aloy, as I've said, is the kind of man who didn't normally have even one idea in a day. And he'd already had one idea with the Lala. So when he suddenly got another idea, he thought, wow, this is a very special day. And his idea was to take out his parang and thwack. He cut himself loose from the birds, which all flew away. And uh-oh, Father Aloy found himself falling down towards the earth with increasing speed towards terminal velocity. Fortunately for Father Aloy, it was the rice planting season. So all the paddy fields were flooded, making the ground, the soil very soft, and he landed with a big splat. He didn't really do any serious damage to his body. But he wasn't the only one in the paddy field. No. There were some Ebans who were there working in the field, and they had the astonishing experience of seeing someone fall from the sky. And of course, this was long before the days of aeroplanes. Well, the only people who live up in the sky are the gods. So this must have been a god who had fallen from the sky. And naturally, they wanted to go and ask him why he had come. And so they got up and they began to run towards Father Aloy, who at that time was picking himself up, and saw them running towards him. And as they came closer, he saw that around their necks, many of them had tattoos, blue tattoos. And there was one very big, mean, burly man who had tattoos on his shoulders and on his chest. Because in the days long ago, I'm sorry to say, the Ebans were head hunters. And the way that you proved your manhood was by going out in a battle. If you met a stranger from another field, perhaps somebody who was in your field who shouldn't be in the field, then what you did was to chop their head off, and you brought the head back, and you could even get to hang it in the Longhouse. And you would then get yourself tattooed to show that you had actually done this thing. So you can imagine Father Aloy was, but to his amazement, when the people arrived, they threw themselves down on the ground and said, oh, please, please, are you a god? Have you fallen from the sky? And Father Aloy, it would be unfair to say that he was thinking quickly, because that was something he just didn't do. But he realized that the situation was not quite as bad as he had first feared. And so he said, a god, yes, yes, I fell from the sky, yes. And to his surprise, and I have to say delight, one of them offered him a nice, fresh
No, we can hear you, Roger.
I just lost the picture completely. Okay, sorry.
We can see and hear you.
So, I'm speaking to a blank screen. So, where was I? So, and then they gave him some bananas and some rice wine. And one of the villagers saw that he was still wincing and came and began to massage him. And when they said, please come to our village, it will be a great honor for us, he did not want to say no. This was far better than staying at home and being scolded by his wife. And meanwhile, a mother of Aloy, it was late in the afternoon, where was her husband? So she sent out her son and his siblings to see if he could find his father. Well, Aloy had accompanied his father on many hunting trips and knew where his father liked to hunt, and soon found the clearing. He saw the blowpipe, his father's blowpipe, lying there on the grass. But of his father, there was no sign. And very worriedly, he and his siblings went back to the Longhouse, and his mother said, "Don't worry. Tomorrow we will go to the market, and someone surely will have news of your father." So, the next morning they went to the market, Mother Aloy and Aloy. And all the people they asked had no news until she came to the fish seller. And he said that coming across the river on the ferry, he had talked to a woman who said that her neighbor had told her that her sister-in-law had told her that she had met a man who said that he had a friend who lived in the village beyond the forest, and that yesterday a god had fallen from the sky. Surely, if anybody knows where is your husband, then that god will know. So Mother of Aloy and Aloy took the boat and sailed up the river until they came to the village beyond the forest. They could hear the drums, they could hear the pipes, they could hear some chanting. They saw a great line, a procession of people queuing outside the house where the god who had fallen from the sky had been given residence. They joined the queue, and as they approached, they were told that when they came to the presence of the god, they should bow down, they should not look him in the eye, and they should speak most respectfully, particularly because they had no gift, no offering to give him. Finally, it was their turn. Mother Aloy and Aloy came forward, and Mother Aloy said, "Oh, a god who has fallen from the sky, can you help me? I'm looking for my husband. His name is..." And at that moment, she looked up. And you can imagine her surprise when sat there in front of her was her husband. "Huh? It's you?" And Father Aloy looked at them, at her, and said, "Really? You? And he was taken aback. And all the people who were standing around were also shaken and told her to be respectful. He said, "No, this is not God who's fallen from the sky. This is my husband." And to prove it, she said, "If he takes off that robe, you will see there on his shoulder, there is a birthmark in the shape of a durian." Father Aloy backed away, but one of the villagers came and removed the robe, and sure enough, there was the birthmark. Mother Aloy grabbed hold of Father Aloy and dragged him out from the house and said, "Now, home." And Father Aloy began to protest, but Aloy took the blowpipe and lifting it up, aimed it at his father's rather large posterior. "And he said, and he ran away and ran all the way back to the village. And ever since that day, although Father Aloy still has his dreams and his head is often in the clouds, he always makes sure that his feet are still firmly on the ground. It's disconcerting. I'm looking at the blank screen. I just wonder, am I still with you, or have I gone completely?
Find your way back. Okay. So, what a wonderful, wonderful event this has been. What a wonderful festival. You know, we're very pleased from the east side of the North American continent to be able to be part of this and to support this. I thought, as we were planning for today, we thought it would be nice to close with a traditional address that comes from this part of the country, from the Haudenosaunee, who many of you know as the Iroquois Nation. And there's a tradition to begin and end all gatherings with a Thanksgiving address. And it's one that is allowed to be shared. I happen to know one of the clan mothers, and she gave me a version that I can use. So I've done my good and due diligence there. It's a particularly beautiful way of giving thanks. And I will say that the version I will use is one that is not the several hours long that it usually emerges into. But there is a refrain. And at the end of each little section, we say together, "Now our minds are one." And that's kind of the refrain that we use to go through this. Let me just begin, and it is, I usually tell extemporaneously. You will notice me looking down because it is a rather involved address, but I think it's particularly beautiful. Today we have gathered, and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live our lives in balance and harmony with each other and with all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. And we say, "Now our minds are one."
Now our minds are one.
We are all thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us, as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks, and we say, "Now our minds
are together. Minds together.
Give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms. Falls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks. Water.
Now our minds are one.
We turn our minds to the fish who live in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water.
Now you can do
We turn to the fish.
video
We send our greetings.
submitted by tomorrow afternoon 2 o'clock.
Now our minds.
Class
Now we turn to the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eyes
There
can
should
see,
be 2 people, okay? We have talked enough. Last minute you guys have put me in something and all you're asking.
fields of plant life. As far as the eyes can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all the food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, the vegetables, the beans and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living beings draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greeting of thanks. Now our minds together. Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicines and the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We are honored by them when they give up their lives so that we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. We now turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many people of the world use a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now
our minds are one.
We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. We are thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now our minds are one. Now we turn to the west, where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them water that renews life. We are thankful that they keep those evil things underground. We bring our minds together as one and send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunderers. Now our minds are one. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. We put our minds together to give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights up the nighttime sky. She is the leader of women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on Earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now our minds are one. We give thanks to the stars, who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they bring us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to the stars. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help us throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers.
Now our minds are one.
Now we turn our thoughts to our Creator, the Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on this Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to our Creator. Now
our minds are one.
We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. Something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. Now
our minds are one.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. That was beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you, Jim.
And such a beautiful way to round off this evening. Fortunately, now I've got my picture back, which is great. A huge thank you to all the tellers, to Regina and Jonathan and Heathrow and PapaJoe and Cassandra and yours truly. Okay, it's been a fabulous evening. Really, really enjoyed it, or a fabulous morning, or a fabulous lunchtime. And just to see the diversity, the way people tell, and what you have shared of your skills and the culture. It's just been really enriching here.
Yeah.
So thank you
Transported into the Longhouse itself.
Sorry, Jiva?
Transported into the Longhouse itself.
Absolutely.
Just this, absolutely visual treat. Though it was told, I just saw visuals every now and then.
Everywhere.
I think
you.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is, as I said at the start, our first collaboration with WVSG. We really like the way they've run things, and I'm hoping that we will get more of this opportunity just to bring people together and have a diversity of tellers and tales and styles, and just sort of bring people together and to be able to share this common space. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much. I don't want to go on because it's 11 o'clock here, and I know Regina needs to get her breakfast. I think Cassie needs to go and get some lunch. Okay, so from everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll get the video out and send you the link as soon as we can. Okay?
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Very much, Roger.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Regina.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Maybe
Thank
if
you
the
so
fellows
much.
just want to hang on.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for the wonderful stories.